Anne St. John, who's going to be walking you through this webinar today. And today's webinar is all about the TOK essay, okay? So if you're here, you're probably a student that has this as an upcoming deadline, or maybe you're thinking very far ahead, trying to get prepared for this, and you've come to the right place today because we have our wonderful Anne St. John, who is our TOK tutor today, who has tons of experience. She'll introduce herself a little bit more in a second. But I'll quickly talk about what are we going to do today, okay? So first, we're going to start this presentation with a little bit of introduction to our teacher today. We're going to talk about how to choose a TOK essay question and how to kind of decide which one is going to be for you, what you'll be able to do with the different TOK questions. We'll talk about planning and how to get started. And then we'll finish up with some final tips that can really help you make sure that you're getting to that deadline. You're going to be in a strong place, you're going to be productive, and you're going to know what to do. Okay, so that's the agenda for today. The idea of today is basically we want to take you through writing the TOK essay from picking a question to having your first draft. And so it's going to be a really, really comprehensive opportunity for you to learn about this opportunity from someone who really has loads of experience and knows what they're talking about. So that will be all from me. I'll let Anne get started. Throughout the presentation, you're going to have opportunities to interact and ask questions, and we'll explain that a bit in a second. But please make sure that if you are curious or have questions about anything that you do, make sure that you come and ask those, because this is your opportunity basically to hear how to do the TOK essay and how to have all those questions you have answered. So without further ado, I'll pass over to you, Anne. And yes, thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Hi, everyone. I wish I could see you, but I can't. But I hope you're all well. I'm sure you've all had a really busy day at school. So thank you for giving up your time to come today. And I hope that you're going to find it really, really useful. As Hannah said, I've been teaching for 30 years. I love teaching. I love tutoring. I've taught in lots of different international schools all around the world. I've been very lucky. I've taught in South America and in Asia, and I've spent the last eight years teaching in Angola in Africa, which I really, really loved. Because I miss teaching, I joined Lanterna to become a tutor, and I've been doing that for roughly a year. That's been a fantastic opportunity for me. So as I say, I've got lots of experience teaching TOK. 30 years is a long time. I've seen a lot of changes in the TOK guide, and I'm going to talk to you about some of that later on today. But I'm also a history teacher as well. Now, as Hannah said, this is your opportunity to get as much out of this as you possibly can. And so we're really interested in knowing your questions. If it's all right with all of you, it would probably be better for me to talk for about 45 minutes or so, in the hope that by the time I get to the end, I've answered your question without you even having to ask it. As we're going through it, why don't you pop your question into the chat function so that we can deal with those at the end, or you can raise your hand in the last 15 minutes or so. All right. Right, let's get started then. I hope you find this really useful. All right, so here are the dreaded prescribed titles. I'm sure you've all seen them. You know that there are 6 prescribed titles every year, and you have to choose one of them. I'm not going to go through, I'm not going to read these 6 titles to you. I think you should be familiar with them already. The aim of today's webinar isn't necessarily to choose one of these questions and to help you answer it, although I am going to use one of them as examples. The real purpose of this webinar is to make sure that you know how to plan to write it and how to actually get your first drafted. Okay, so as you can see, there are 6 prescribed titles. I'm actually going to focus on question number 3, and we'll look at that in a little bit more detail later on. Okay. All right, now, I cannot emphasize how important it is to make sure that you choose the right question. Don't just put your finger on one of those questions and say, that's the one I'm going to deal with. Spend some time making sure you've made the right choice. I've had many interactions with students where they really wish they hadn't done what they'd started. So let's see how we might make the right decision. When you look at those 6 titles, what I would recommend is that you ask yourself some really, really simple questions. And you can see there that I've got 5. So have these questions in front of you and ask yourself, do I understand what the question's asking me to do? Now, the reason that I've chosen question number 3 is that actually I mistook that question and I didn't understand it immediately. And I'm going to show you how important it is to make sure you definitely do understand what it's asking you to do. ask yourself, am I actually really interested in this question, or am I doing it because my friend's doing it as well? Or am I doing it because my teacher's recommended it? Make sure that you're interested in it, okay? You're going to spend a lot of your life writing it. Then ask yourself, do I have a lot of ideas about how to explore this question? There are some questions that you are going to hit a wall with, and you're just not going to have any ideas about it. You're going to know that's not the one for you. Do you have lots of ideas buzzing in your head about the question that you've chosen? Now, this is really important. Number 4, does it allow me to include personal examples that reflect my IB journey? Now, I know that that's a phrase that's thrown around a lot, and what does it mean? But basically, it's about you as a learner. Try to remember that every single student that does the diploma has to write a TOK essay. So yours has got to stand out as being unique. And the only way that it can do that is if it reflects you as a person and you as a knower. So ask yourself, can I include my IA in the question that I've chosen? Maybe I've done an IA in history, for example. Or can I include my EE that I'm writing about? Because nobody else is writing about this particular thing. Can I include that in my essay? Is there something about my CAS opportunities that I can include in my essay? Because if there is, that makes it immediately different, okay? And then ask yourself, can I include local, national, global, real life examples? Now, many of you might have questions about these real life examples and how on earth you integrate it. And I hope by the end of this session, I've helped you with that. But, one of my recommendations would be get yourself really involved in the news while you're writing this essay. What I do is I plug myself into the Global News podcast, and I listen to it for 30 minutes every night. And it's just, I listen to it as I'm going to sleep. And it's amazing how many times I think, that story works really well with one of the arguments that I'm trying to develop in my TOK essay. So I think it's just a really good sort of habit to get into. It's only 30 minutes of your life, and it might be really, really useful for you. Now, once you've asked yourself those questions, you've probably got some ideas about what you're going to choose. But there are 2 strategies that you can use to really hone down which question you're going to choose. And I'm just going to talk about this last one, this group discussion first, because it's something that your teacher might actually do with you. What I do as a classroom teacher is I put my students into groups of 6, and between them, they decide which one's going to take each of the 6 prescribed titles. So every group has got somebody doing at least, doing all of those 6 questions. And all they do is they brainstorm it for 5 minutes, and then they talk to each other about those questions. So what you've had is an opportunity to listen to people's take on all of those 6 questions. And it might be that the one that you actually talked about, you didn't like as much as the one that, somebody else spoke about, because you hadn't actually thought about it in the way that they have. And that can really help you to understand what these questions mean. So that could be something that your teacher could do with you. If the teacher's got other ideas, I'm sure they've got lots of wonderful ideas, it doesn't mean that you can't meet with 6 friends and do it. Okay, it's still very possible. You can do it online. It could be, an easy thing to do. But another thing that I would recommend is this thing called the traffic light system. And I'm sure that you use this probably in other classes anyway. All right, now I love color coding everything. You can do it physically on a piece of paper. You can do it electronically, obviously. I would get your 6 questions written down and I would color code them. Color code the ones that you really like in green. Color code in amber the ones that you're just not quite sure about. Maybe you like it, but you don't really know. And then color code in red all those ones that you think, oh God, no way, I'm never going to do that question. Okay, now you can see that I've done that here. The questions 1 and 3, I really know that I like. I don't like question 2 and I don't like question 4, so I've put that in red. And I just don't know about question 5 and 6. I'm really, really not sure about that. So the next step, and you'll get this presentation at the end to remind you about how to do this. But the next step is, ignore all of the red ones because you don't want to do it. And ignore the green ones because you're quite interested in those. And focus simply on the amber questions, but don't take forever about it. Give yourself 5 minutes. And for 5 minutes on a piece of paper, I do recommend that you do this sort of physically. On a piece of paper, brainstorm a couple of things about those amber questions. So, you know, for example, you might look at the key terms. I'm going to show you how to do that a little bit later on. You might look at the key terms. You might want to find words that mean something similar, and you might want to drop down a couple of examples. But you've spent 5 minutes thinking about those questions 5 and 6, okay? Now, once you've done that, you're either going to realize that you really like it, or you're going to realize that you really don't like it. So what we recommend is that you either upgrade these amber to green of, yeah, I think that's a good question now, or you downgrade it to red. No, I absolutely don't like it. And so eventually it'll look a bit more like this. You've got the ones that you definitely don't want to do, but you're still left with 3 that you do want to do. So what are you going to do now? Well, you're going to brainstorm those green ones. You're going to think about those green ones, and you're going to try and decide which one of those you like the best. And you're not going to spend forever on it. Again, 5 minutes for each of those green questions. Ask yourself, what's the question mean? Do I understand the keywords? Have I got any examples? Does my IA fit into it? Does my EE fit into it? And you're just going to write it all down. And then you're going to make that final decision. Am I going to keep those questions green, or am I now going to downgrade it to red? And you can see that I've done that there. I've got number 3 is going to be the one that I do. Now, it may be that you really can't choose. Maybe there are 2 greens that you really love. Please remember that you get 3 interactions that are absolutely obligatory for TOK, that this is time that your teacher will love to spend with you and has to spend with you, okay? Now, and in your first interaction, that's when you'll get to talk to the teacher to say, look, I just don't know between these 2, can you help me? And they will give you some advice, okay? All right, so spend some time making sure that you've made that right decision. Okay. Now, let's say that we have decided on question number 3. If you don't mind, I am going to read it to you because I think it's really important that we know what this question is. Nothing is more exciting than fresh ideas. So why are areas of knowledge often so slow to adopt them? Discuss with reference to the human sciences and one other area of knowledge. So that's the one that I'm going to use as my example. Now, sorry, this is my brainstorm here. Yours will look something like that maybe. Do remember that brainstorms don't have to be neat and tidy. I've tried to tidy mine up a bit so that you can all read it. A brainstorm is supposed to be chaotic with lots and lots of ideas on it, okay? Now, what I've done here is I've created a set of criteria that I think a good brainstorm should have. All right, and the first thing that I would do, as I've said here, is I'm going to break down my key terms. So what I've done is I have physically written that question in the middle of my piece of paper. Now, there's a lot of research that says that if you physically write something, you understand it better than if you type it. Now, there's a lot of debate about that, but I would recommend it. Physically write that title. Please don't reword it. It has to be the actual title. Anybody that rewords it could end up going on a tangent that's not quite what the title's asking you to do. And you will be graded and assessed on the actual title. And if you've gone off in the wrong direction, that's a problem. All right, now I'm going to annotate this. So hopefully you'll be able to see some of my annotations. What I've done is I've put the question in the middle of my page, okay? And you'll notice that over in the corner, I've got, sorry, okay, I've lost my thing. Okay, I've got a key. All right, now anything that's in red is a keyword that I know I'm going to have to unpack. So I think this term, fresh ideas, is really important in this prescribed title. So what I've done is it's a key term, I've underlined it in red, and then I've written, well, to me, that means something that's a novel idea, maybe something that's groundbreaking, maybe it's an idea that's got the potential to redefine an original idea. What I haven't done is I haven't gone to the dictionary and looked up the word fresh and given the definition, and then looked up the word ideas and given the definition, because what that does is it's taken it out of context. So I've come up with my own idea of what fresh ideas means in the context of this particular question. I also notice, and this is where it's really important actually, because I misunderstood this the last time I did it, that can you see here, it actually asks about AOKs. It says nothing's more exciting than fresh ideas. So why are AOKs often so slow to adopt them? It doesn't mean the general public. All right. Now, when I first read that question, I thought, okay, so why are people not willing to accept these ideas? It's actually talking about the AOK. So make sure that you're very clear about that. I would say that you need to also understand the implication of this question. You know, it's saying nothing is more exciting than fresh ideas. And I would question, really? Nothing's more exciting than fresh ideas? Fresh ideas can actually be quite scary. They can be quite expensive. They can sometimes be quite dangerous. So they're not always exciting. And that's an assumption that it's making. It's also making the assumption that AOKs are slow to adopt them. And I think it's all right for you to say, well, yes, you've got to explore that because that's the question. Yes, they are slow to adopt them, and this is why. But I think you can also say, but not all of them, and not entirely. But one thing I've got, about this question, and I would perhaps mention it in my introduction, is how do you measure that? How do you measure how slowly an AOK adopts a fresh idea? All right. Now, I don't know if your teachers use subject reports with you. I'm going to show you a subject report later on. But when I was reading it, it's where examiners are saying the sort of issues that they've got with essays that students are writing. They do say that it's all right to question the question, but don't go on and on and on and on about it. All right. In the introduction, yes, you can mention what the assumption is, but don't talk too much about it, okay? Because it doesn't actually add to your understanding of the argument that you're going to be developing. All right, now on my brainstorm here, I've unpacked that question. Actually, I haven't, because it says discuss with reference to the human sciences and one other AOK. All essays are about 2 AOKs. All right, you don't include all 5 or 6 of them. It's only about 2. This one says you have to do the human sciences. Make sure you do, and then choose one other AOK. Now, if we go back to the original slide, let me just get rid of that. I'm going to clear that, my drawing. Okay, if we go back to the original slide, it says that you need on your brainstorm to, look at the key terms. You're going to make sure that you understand the assumption of the title. We've done that. And you're going to select your 2 AOKs. Now, I've chosen the human sciences because I have to. And then I've chosen the natural sciences. But I think, on your brainstorm, it's perfectly okay to look at the arts, mathematics, history, and then decide which other one you're going to do. All right, your brainstorm doesn't have to be just on the 2 of them, because at this point, you might not know what your second one's going to be about. All right, now on your brainstorm, make sure, please, that you are exploring different points of view. Now, in the old syllabus that you won't have seen, they don't use the word point of view. They use the word claim and counterclaim. Don't do that anymore. They talk about points of view. And the difference between those 2 things is that a claim and a counterclaim are often opposites. And knowledge doesn't work like that very easily. Now they ask you to look at something from one point of view and then look at it from a different point of view. It doesn't have to be the absolute opposite to your first point, okay? And I think that can make your essay often much easier to write. Now you can see that I've done that here. If I'm going to look at my human sciences, I've looked at 2 points of view. Now my points of view are numbered 1 and 2. I've put them in orange, and that's up in my key there. One point of view is that I'm going to look at the human sciences as being slow to adopt fresh ideas. And then I'm coming up with ideas about why that might be. Now, I might say that maybe the human sciences are slow to adopt ideas because ideas take a long time to vet. Think about the methods and tools that a human scientist uses. They use a lot of market research. Well, market research takes a long time, and there are a lot of issues with it. Quite often the samples aren't the right size, or the results are unpredictable. Humans are unpredictable, and therefore it's often a very slow process with the human sciences because of their methodology. Now, do remember that you do need to be thinking about your knowledge framework. Now, this is new to the TOK syllabus. The knowledge framework is the way in which teachers get you to understand what an area of knowledge looks like. And there are 4 components to that. And all I've done is, whenever I think that I'm using a part of the knowledge framework, I make a note of it on my brainstorm. All right, so you can see here that I'm beginning to talk about sort of market research, and I think, oh yes, that's about methods and tools. And I've underlined that in brown, and I've put over here that that's my knowledge framework. So I'm remembering what it's about, okay? I think a little bit later on, I talk about ethics over here. That's part of my knowledge framework as well. And so I've highlighted that in brown. It's good to be using these 4 knowledge frameworks, because it helps make your essay about knowledge and not about the human sciences necessarily, okay? All right, now you can see there that I've put some real life examples. I mean, I've looked at a different point of view here. I've said, you know, that maybe in the human sciences, ideas are more quickly adopted. Now, they might be more quickly adopted because maybe the methods that are being used now have been improved. All right, or maybe it's because they're much more scientific than they used to be. And one of my real life examples there is, you know, if you're doing psychology, which is part of the human sciences, and you might want to state that in your essay, you know, that a lot of Freudian theory has been replaced recently, and it's been replaced by much more scientific and evidence-based theories. And so they've been quick to adopt these theories because we know that the scientific method is very rigorous, and you know, we're much more likely to accept it because of that. Now you can see here, and I've also looked at the natural sciences because I think that it allows me to explore lots of things. Again, I've got my 2 ideas here. I've got my, you know, the natural sciences are slow to adopt ideas, and I've put a whole load of reasons why that might be. Maybe it's because there's a time lag between research, publication, application of ideas. Maybe it's because the consequences are really dangerous and they don't want to accept it. Maybe it's because there's competing ideas. And when you think about competing ideas, you might be thinking about power, which is a TOK concept. And what I've done there is I've highlighted that in a different color for concepts in that purple, because there are 12 TOK concepts. You need them all over your brainstorm to show that you're looking at these concepts. Maybe you're saying that the natural sciences are slow to adopt ideas because of vested interests. I'm going to be talking about the church later on. Link that to ethics, link that to your knowledge framework. Now, I'm going to obviously, you need to read this more slowly. I'm talking too fast. I'm just trying to let you see really that you do need to be making sure that when you're doing your brainstorm, that you're thinking about these knowledge frameworks, okay? You can see them there. I'm just going to annotate it to make sure that you know that the knowledge framework is about scope. It's about perspective, methods and tools and ethics. Your teachers will be teaching you through those lenses. That's what they are, they're lenses, okay? And make sure, please, that you also know what those 12 TOK concepts are. And I've listed them for you here, all right? I would use those words, use them in the essay. Remember, there are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of TOK essays being written. You know, people are, it's normal for an examiner to want a quick sort of way of knowing that you know what you're talking about. And if they see you using the right terminology, it's going to convince them that you've got a good understanding of the course. Now, I do think on your mind map, it might be a good idea to develop a roadmap. But if you don't mind, I'm going to leave that for a minute because I think it comes out better when we look at the box plan. So I'm just going to get rid of that now. Or maybe I should perhaps have... I do apologise. I didn't clear all my drawings. There we go. So they're not going to ruin the page anymore. All right, so now you've done your big brainstorm and you're feeling really happy about it. Hopefully you'll show that to your teacher when you do your first interaction, because that will help you have a good conversation with them. All right, now you're ready to start writing your essay. I cannot stress how important it is to read sample essays. So I'm just going to show you these sample essays. Now, you may not have access to these, but your teachers will, okay? And the sample essays come through IBO, and your teachers will have them to use with you. Now, for example, last year, they had an essay with this title here. They give you the entire essay and you can read those essays. And then, fantastically, they give you the examiner's comment. They tell you how much they gave that essay and why they gave that essay that grade. I think there's nothing more useful than knowing what's going through in an examiner's mind when they're trying to decide what your essay is going to get. So I'm sure your teachers aren't going to mind. Ask them if you can see some of these sample essays. I'm sure they're working with you on them anyway in class. I think it's really important to use. Now, can you just see that? Let me see if I can make that a little bit bigger for you. Hopefully you can see it, yeah? All right, now, with your sample essays, it's really easy to read them, but not really pay attention to them. So make it into a working document, okay? What I suggest you do is read it and mark it. All right, now I've given you the rubric there. I will go through the rubric with you if you've got time a little bit later on, but I would grade it. And then I would look at the examiner's report and see if you got it right. Now, it's perfectly fine if you get a different number, but I think it helps you to understand why an examiner gave it the number that they did. Another thing that you could do, and this is what I do with my students in class, is that I use this box plan. Now, what I do is I put this box plan in front of me and I look at the essay that's been written by another student and I highlight everything that I think should be in that essay. Now, you can see, for example, here that in an introduction, I've given a list here of what I think should go into an introduction. Well, what I might do is I'd read the sample essay and I'd highlight whether or not it's got all of those things in it. And at the side, I might put the things I think that student's done really well. And then I might say, but they didn't do this, that, and the other. And it's amazing that that will help you write your introduction. Okay, so it might be a good idea to use this and just ask yourself, has the student in this sample essay got the things that should be in there? And that will help you to A, grade it, but B, also to know how to write your own essay. I do think that one of the hardest things to do is to actually know where to start and how to start the essay. I think if you keep reading other people's essays, it will give you an idea of how to write it. You know, students often ask me, do I write in the first person? Because you know that in most academic writing, you shouldn't. But in a TOK essay, you can. All right, so if you read these essays, it'll show you how they're structured, how people use the knowledge framework language, how people explain things, okay? Now, my top tip before you get started is make sure that you've got your TOK course outline in front of you. Now, I am not going to pretend that this is the most riveting read in the world. It isn't, but I would really recommend read your TOK guide. Your teachers would have given it to you, okay? And I think it really helps you to understand exactly what's expected of you. So if, for example, you really don't get the knowledge framework, and I think this is something that students are finding quite difficult to understand, I might click on my areas of knowledge, and it explains that for history, for example, these are the types of things you're going to think about in terms of scope, perspective, methods and tools, and ethics. Remember, I told you that there are 4 components of the knowledge framework. Well, if you can't remember what they are, keep this guide in front of you so that you can look. And actually, it's really interesting, you know, if you look at some of the questions that they pose here, you might think, oh, that's a really good question. It relates really well to my prescribed title. I'm going to think about that. All right, so make sure that you've got this in front of you. I think it's really good as well. It's got all the concepts in there. It'll just remind you how to write a knowledge-based essay and not a topic-based essay. Okay, right, lovely. Let me just see what we can do now. A lot of students forget, I think, that the TOK essay is a researched essay as well, just like the EE is, just like maybe your history essay is or your science essay is. Many people think it just comes off the top of your head. It doesn't. You do need to do some research, okay? So what I've done is I've created a couple of a template for you to use. Again, you'll have access to this if you want it. Please, please, please make sure that you use credible sources. The IBO are really hot on this, and they're also really hot on citing and making sure that you are avoiding plagiarism. All right, so make sure that if you use another source, that you cite that source really clearly in your essay. So let's say that you're going to want to do some research. Okay, I've created a really simple research template. It doesn't have to be complicated. I know from experience as a mother of a child that's just taken the IB and as of a student myself, that it's so easy to lose the source that you found this really great argument in. Make sure that you don't do that by putting your source link into this template here. So let's say that you found a really good web page, put the link there to remind you that's the one that you were using, and then make sure that you cite it properly in the right format. Now, I've got MLA citation there just simply because that's what my school does. It doesn't matter, you don't have to do MLA, whatever your school uses, use that. And then on the other side here, make notes on that particular web page that you've chosen, but not on the entire web page. Only make notes on the ideas that are directly related to your title. Okay, that saves you time and it makes it much, much more relevant and concise. All right, now that's the sort of thing that you might have in front of you when you're listening to that podcast that I asked you to listen to, you know, the Global News Network. Something might have come up and you'll think, okay, I'm going to use that particular conflict as an example of a fresh idea and how it's being used. And then I'm going to write notes on this. Okay, so make sure that you're taking a note of where you're getting all your wonderful ideas from. All right, it might be that your ideas are coming from your IA or from your EE. You can still take notes here. You're just going to cite it slightly differently. All right, now resources. You know, you can use anything for TOK as long as it's credible. What I've done is I've put together just some ideas of things that you might use. You can click on them and they'll take you to the relevant pages. Do you know what I would suggest that if your class teacher's okay with this, that in class you've got like a place where you're storing all of your resources that you're using, because it's great to share. It's not cheating. You're not going to use the same article. All right. For example, I've got TED Talks there. Well, TED Talks are about everything. So you would just type in the thing that you want to search for and it makes it different to, you know, the rest of your peers. And I think it should be a living document that you're adding to all the time so that everybody's using it collectively, or just do it with a group of friends. It doesn't have to be the whole class, okay? But hopefully you'll have lots of sort of resources. It would be a good idea not to have them all about the same type of thing. So, for example, you can tell from my accent that I'm British. You know, maybe it wouldn't be a good idea for me to have the BBC and the Guardian only. All right, it's good for me to be looking at lots of sources that come from lots of different types of countries and places and things like that. All right, so you've done your research, you've done your brainstorm, you've done some research, and now you think, how am I going to put all of these wild ideas into some kind of structure? And that's where we look at the box plan. All right, now the box plan will be something that you'll have access to. Can I make it really clear to you, though, that the examiners do not expect a particular format? So this box plan that I'm suggesting is something that you can definitely use, but you don't have to. All right, there are lots of different ways of writing that essay. That's why I suggest that you look at those sample essays, because many of those sample essays are structured differently. And it might be that you like a particular style better than another one. All right, but because we've only got an hour, I can only go through one way of structuring it. I won't go through all of them, though I might point out a different way as I go through it. All right, so I'm really sorry if it's boring listening to a box plan, but I just hope that it'll help you in the way that it's helped students in the past, okay? So when you have a box plan in front of you like this, make sure that you write the title at the top. And I've said this before, write the actual title, don't reword it, all right, the actual title. And then what I've done is I've told you how many words I recommend for each section of the essay. I reckon your introduction should be about 150 to 200 words. When you look at some of the sample essays, some of them don't even have introductions, and actually they've still scored okay, because when you look at the rubric, all it says is that you have to have a clear, coherent response to the title. So, you know, if you're not into writing introductions, they're not going to fail you over it. But I just think an introduction helps the examiner to understand that you know what you're talking about. All right. And I favour them. So if I was going to do this, I would write an introduction of about 150 to 200 words. And I've written here all the things that probably should go into an introduction. Remember, it's the first thing an examiner reads. So they form an opinion very quickly because they've got a lot of essays to look at. So make sure that your first sentence gets the reader's attention, okay? Some type of hook, something interesting, so the examiner's in the right frame of mind when they're starting to read it, okay? Then make sure that you do these things that we've done on the brainstorm already. So you're partway there. You've already done lots of this. You're going to unpack the key terms. You're going to explain in your introduction what you think the title's asking you to do. And you're going to say whether or not you agree or you disagree with the assumption. Now, remember, I said there's an assumption there that fresh ideas are slowly adopted, where I might say, well, I don't know if I entirely agree with that. And I put that in my introduction. I might formulate a thesis. Now, there's a lot of debate amongst colleagues as to whether or not you should have a thesis. It's up to you. A thesis very often is the answer to the question. Now, you'll notice that all of the prescribed titles have the same command term, all right? And the command term is discuss. Now, if you're going to write a discursive essay, it might be that you don't know what the answer is yet. So you don't want that thesis right at the beginning. It might be that that's going to make your discussion a little bit narrower than you wanted it to be. So it's fine if you don't have a thesis. What you could have instead is a roadmap. And I love that sort of idea. It's a road, it's a sentence that's like a road that tells the examiner that this is the type of thing I'm going to be looking at. And then I'm going to make my decision. I'm going to make my answer. So in red here, I've given some ideas of, let me just undo that for a moment so that it's clearer. Okay, I've given some ideas of what I might write as my roadmap. So if you don't mind me reading it, I'm just going to read it very quickly. In the human sciences and the natural sciences, fresh ideas are often slow to be adopted if they result in a paradigm shift. There are vested interests involved, or they have negative consequences. However, they might be adopted more quickly if they're consistent with existing evidence, help to resolve issues, plug a knowledge gap, and are compelling. Now, what an examiner is going to think is, oh, okay, they're the sorts of issues that this person's going to look at. I've got a good idea now of what they're going to explore. And that helps them to know that you know what you're doing, actually. I think that's very, very important. Now, let me get rid of that. Now, because this essay title is about the human sciences and one other, I would say that your first body paragraph should be about the human sciences because they've mentioned it in their essay. I think it should come first. They're not going to fail you if you don't do that, but I think it's just a good idea. Now, I would recommend 4 body paragraphs. That's 4 different points of view. 2 about the human sciences, 2 about the other AOK, and I've chosen the natural sciences. Now, each body paragraph should be about 300 words. Again, you can change that if you want it to be. And these are the types of things that I think should go in that paragraph. State your argument, state your claim, state your point of view very, very clearly. Discuss it. Make sure that you've got a real life example to justify it. Now, this is where it's different now. If you read the rubric, you must explain the implication of your argument and you must evaluate your point of view. Now, students forget to do that, and I'm going to show you in a moment how to do that, okay? Now, in red, I've put here that this paragraph should be about the human sciences because it's the AOK that's mentioned in the title. Remember that since the assumption of the title is that fresh ideas are slow to be adopted, I think that should be the focus of your first argument. Yes, they're slow to be adopted because, and you're going to be looking at that point of view. Your next body paragraph would look at another point of view and say, as it says here, this paragraph will be focusing again on the human sciences, but it will probably argue that there are cases where fresh ideas are more quickly adopted. And I'll go back to my brainstorm and I'll look at those ideas that I looked at and I'll start to explore those. And then my 2 other body paragraphs would be about the natural sciences. Now, if you don't mind, I thought I'd go through the natural sciences as an example, just because I think it highlights it best, I suppose, is what I'm getting at here. All right, now, My claim here is going to be that the heliocentric model of the solar system was adopted slowly, all right, because it represented a paradigm shift and it was resisted by the church. Now, I don't know if you remember that it replaced Copernicus. It said that the sun was at the center of the universe, not the earth. It was an absolute shift in scientific thought. And of course, if you're going to have a paradigm shift like that, then it's going to be probably very slowly adopted and it's going to be resisted. Now, we know at the time that this was happening, that it was resisted by the church, okay, that to have the sun in the middle and not the earth, they didn't like it. Now, the thing that's really important here is that you've got your example, all right, so hopefully you've studied that in class. Make sure that this real life example is something you understand. We know that there are websites out there and you can read them and you can look at everybody's essay title, you can look at all their arguments that they've got, you can look at all the examples that they have, but if you don't understand those examples, you won't do it successfully. So use something that you've been doing in class and that you get, that you really understand. Now, it's important in the rubric that you explain the implication of that. And I'm going to show you how to do that. This is important because many fresh ideas may be controversial initially if they result in a fundamental change. You've shown a fundamental change happening, all right, with this heliocentric example. Well, that's still important today. If you're going to have something that changes everything upside down, then it's going to take a long time for people to adopt it. Also, do remember that there are powerful institutions today that still have the capability to prevent new ideas from being adopted. All right. And then evaluate that claim. And the way that you would do that is to say, look, I think you should take this argument seriously because these institutions are often the ones that control public opinion. They're the ones that control financing. They often work in collaboration with each other, which means that they are really powerful institutions. And that means that they can very effectively resist fresh ideas. All right, so I hope that shows you how you're going to use that rubric. And then, of course, you need your conclusion. And I'm very conscious of the time, so I'm quickly going to run through that. Your conclusion is the last thing the examiner reads, make it good. All right, it must be a direct answer to the question. It must synthesize your ideas. And make sure, please, that it isn't more than 1,600 words. And I've put there, because students are always asking, does that include the title? No, it doesn't. Does it include in-text citations? No, it doesn't. Does it include the bibliography? No, it doesn't. All right, so make sure that you know that. My quick tips here are make sure that each paragraph directly relates to that question. Refer to the knowledge framework where you can. Use the concepts that are important. Use evidence to support your perspectives and proofread that essay before you submit it. All right. Now, she's rushing towards the end. When I get there, this is your TOK rubric. It is really, really important that you look at it carefully. All right. Focus on the title it tells you to. Link it to 2 AOKs it tells you to. Write clear, coherent arguments. Support them with real life experiences from your IB journey. Explore different perspectives. Explain the implication of your arguments and evaluate them. If you want a 9 or a 10, that's what you have to do. But I love these sort of characteristics at the bottom here. If I read an essay and I think it's ineffective, it's descriptive, it's incoherent, and it's formless, you're going to get a 1 or 2. What terrible words for somebody to use. Hopefully that doesn't describe any of your writing. But if you want this 9 out of 10, your essay's got to be insightful. All right, it has to be convincing, accomplished, and lucid. So really think about those characteristics when you're reading those sample essays. Okay. Do notice their language is really important. They are using the words argument, clear, coherent. They're using points of view. They're using evaluation. It's lovely for you to use that language in your essay. All right, now, one thing that I always recommend that you ask your teacher for is, have they seen the subject report? I always read it because it tells teachers what students are often doing wrong, and it gives us advice about how we can make it better. The last report said the following things, so make sure that you know this. Remember, there's no set structure. Your response needs to be clear, coherent, and a critical exploration of the question. Doesn't have to have an introduction if you don't want it to. Show your understanding of that rubric that I just showed you by using the language in your essay. Say that this is a point of view. This is the implication of that point of view. This is my evaluation of that point of view, because an examiner is going to say, yeah, they know how I'm going to be marking this essay. All right. Make sure in your that you thread the knowledge framework and the concepts throughout your essay, really important. And make sure that you use these real life examples. Remember, I've said, don't go onto the internet and use these help sites, because everybody does it. And honestly, as an examiner, you'll read one essay and say, oh yeah, so they're using COVID as an example, the same as everybody else. That doesn't mean you can't use COVID, but use it differently to everybody else. If you're going on these sites, everybody's doing it in exactly the same way, and examiners know that. All right. I thought that this was quite interesting, actually. Now, I've never seen them say this before, and I think they're absolutely right. To be effective, the real life example shouldn't be an outlier. All right, so don't come up with the really odd example that shows a different perspective when that example isn't really representative of the AOK as a whole. All right, so don't just come up with this bizarre thing that happened that really is just an outlier, because it doesn't make your argument convincing. All right, now your teacher will help you with this, but make sure, please, that you use a basic font, that it is size 12. It actually says that in the guide. You need it to be double spaced. It must be for annotations, please. Cite your sources to avoid malpractice. Have your in-text citations. Make sure there's a bibliography or a work cited. It doesn't matter. They're both right. An examiner may want to locate a source, so make sure you do it properly. All right. It's a big deal if it isn't done honestly. Okay. And finally, important advice. I think I've already gone through that. My big personal advice is use your interactions well. You get 3 interactions with your teachers. Your teacher will decide how to use them, though in the guide it tells you what should be done at each of those 3 interactions. But I think the great thing about it is it's valuable time between you and the teacher that they have to give you. And it gives you a chance to work out the things that you're worried about. And it may be that in the second interaction, you're not in the same place as everybody else. So your interaction is going to look different to everybody else's. That's fine, okay, because that's what you need. But do remember that you have to make a note of that interaction on your planning form. And that planning form is sent to the examiners. Now, they don't use it in order to make the final result. I think what it's used for really is to show that you've been through a process and that you've taken advice and you've worked on it, and that it isn't something that you wrote the night before, just off the top of your head, okay? But really use those interactions well. Be prepared, listen to your teacher, ask them for advice, make notes about what they say, because you will forget, and then hopefully you'll get the grade that you want and you deserve. All right. Now, okay. I think we're at the right stage. We've got about 10 minutes. So I'd love to answer your questions. This bit makes me a little bit nervous. I might not know the answer. If I don't, I'm going to be honest about it, because I think the worst thing about this would be for me to give you misinformation. All right. So I'll try my hardest to answer them. Are there any questions, Hannah? Have you seen anything there?
Yes, exactly. Well, fantastic. First of all, thank you so much, Anne. That was fantastic. Everyone watching, I hope that you found some of those things useful. I know if I'd been able to see this as a student when I was really struggling with my TOK essay, that this would have been so helpful. So thank you so much. We do have some questions coming in. The first one, now this is just more kind of like a practical tip. Someone here has asked, do in-text citations count for the word count for the exhibition? So I know you said that for the essay they don't. I wonder if you know whether that would count for the exhibition?
I don't think they ever do. I mean, in the extended essay, they don't count. In the IAs, they don't count. In history, I'm a history teacher. So I would presume not, no.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Now, this is quite an interesting one. This student is saying they've heard people talking about a tool like ChatGPT. I don't know how familiar you are with something like ChatGPT. This student is asking, ChatGPT can be useful for some other subjects to begin that process of studying, obviously not to write your essay or to do the work for you, but to kind of generate ideas or to help you with that beginning process. To what extent do you think that's helpful as a tool as TOK, or can you imagine some ways that that might be helpful for students who are beginning to write their TOK essay?
Okay. I do think that lots of schools are working with this at the moment. And I think you very much need to go by the advice that your particular school gives. It's been very interesting working with different schools, that different schools have got different approaches. I know that some schools don't like it at all, and I know many of them see it as a really valuable learning tool. I think it's something that's out there and students are going to use, and I would recommend that you can use it, and that it could be very useful for you. It might help you to generate sort of knowledge questions. It might give you ideas of examples to look at. It's new technology. I was explaining to Hannah that I'm out of the classroom this year, and it's come around the year that I'm not in the classroom, so I'm not as au fait with it as I'd like to be. I know that my son at university is allowed to use it and finds it very, very useful. You know, I would feel more comfortable to say, talk to your teacher, talk to your school about it. But it's out there and it's very valuable. And if you can use it properly, I think to sort of generate knowledge questions, it could be great.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I'll just add to that very, very quickly. So to anyone who's not so familiar with me, I am an ex-IB student. So I graduated from the IB 2019 with 44 points. So I did a TOK essay myself. And I would say if ChatGPT had been around when I was kind of a student doing this, I think it would have been really great when I was struggling with real life examples, or to find ones that weren't personal when I was trying to think about what could be out there in the world to help me with this. I think ChatGPT could be super useful to say, do you know any examples, for example, of something that's happened in the natural sciences where this has happened? And I can imagine it would be super, super useful in those cases. Obviously, that's on top of, so I also was not listening to things like podcasts. I thought that was a brilliant tip, Anne, that I wish I'd been doing when I was a student. So definitely do things like that as well, which will help you find answers. But I imagine that ChatGPT could be super useful for that. And I would definitely recommend if you've discussed with your teacher and you're allowed to do that, I would say go for it. I think it would be super useful. Obviously, so long as there's no copy and pasting and using the ideas directly from the machine. So that's what kind of my 2 cents. Okay. Another student, Anne, is asking, the tips that you gave for brainstorming, would you recommend something similar to the exhibition as well? Or should there be some key differences in the way that you brainstorm those two different things?
Okay, well, with the exhibition, of course, you've got 3 objects that you need to choose. It's got a specific format. I think brainstorming is a wonderful tool, regardless of what the product is. So in this case, it's, you know, with the exhibition, it's a written component, and then of course you have the exhibition in your school. Yes, absolutely, I would do a brainstorm, but the types of things that you're looking for would be very different. So do you remember I gave sort of bullet points, you know, that in your brainstorm you should have the knowledge framework, you should have your concepts, you should have this, that, and the other. Well, I would look very specifically at what is expected for the exhibition and create a list of things that need to go in your brainstorm. But yeah, definitely use it. I think it opens the mind up. I really do. I think it gets you to think about loads of ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, do the same brainstorming process. I thought your color coding thing was super helpful. Look at the TOK guide for the exhibition specifically. And then rather than using the knowledge framework words, like you were looking at things like ethics and the ones that you had in purple, just basically tailor those to what the exhibition guide says. Is that your advice?
Absolutely. Now, in the exhibition, of course, you can focus that on your optional themes rather than your AOKs. So I would change that element of it. But you still are expected to look at the knowledge framework, and it's the same 4 things, and you're still expected to look at the 12 concepts. So yeah, it would just need tweaking a little bit.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.
Okay. We have, let me look at some other ones. Okay, so somebody says some of the questions, such as the sixth one, and I know we don't have it right in front of us, so you might want to pull that up again, can't be answered with a simple yes or no. How would someone go about this, and should they give different perspectives? Now, I have a feeling I know what the answer is going to be from what you were talking about in this presentation, but if you could just really kind of simply address that one.
The very definition of a knowledge question is that there is no right answer. It's never going to be yes or no. It's always going to be an exploration of different ideas. So absolutely. I mean, when you look at that rubric, if you don't explore different ideas, you're never going to be able to get into those top bands. None of those questions there are a yes or no, although in your gut, you might feel that it's more yes or more no. That's fine. But yes, you've absolutely got to consider all of those different points of view.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So this is a question. So this person is, and this kind of touches on something that I almost thought, oh, I should ask this as well. This student here is asking, if you find your real life example from something like AI, or I was thinking if I'm choosing something from my IB syllabus, for example, as my real life example, how do you reference that? Would you be able to give us any advice on how you would reference something like that that's maybe not as tangibly from a source?
I think that a great thing about the TOK essay is that you are allowed to write it much more informally than you do your EE. So your EE is always written in the third person. I think it's absolutely okay in your TOK essay to say, you know, while I was in class, we were studying, I don't know, African independence, because I'm a history teacher, and my IA was looking at this particular thing, and you know, this was my arguments come from that. So actually say that. The examiners love that. While I was in class, I was studying, or I was listening to a podcast, this is what it was called, and these were the ideas that I got from it. So you're not referencing it in text, but you're referring to where you got that idea from.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks very much. Now we have one student here saying, would structuring question 3, so that's the one that you've looked at, in the form of 2 whys, fresh ideas are slow to be adopted. I think the student is asking basically, if they were to tackle question 3 and kind of structure it as to, this is why fresh ideas are slow to be adopted, and this is another reason why, they're basically asking, what do you think of that idea? Would it be viable? Would it not? And I guess you can just answer that in a very simple one word.
Absolutely. I mean, the way that I've got my box plan set up doesn't allow you to do that. The way you've done it works perfectly well. What you could do is your first half of your essay is about, yes, fresh ideas are often slow to adopt, and then use your 2 AOKs to support that argument. The other half of your essay can be, well, actually, they're not that slow, and look at both AOKs there. That's absolutely perfect. That would work well.
Fantastic. Great. We have a couple more. So I'm so glad that loads of people are asking questions. Means that they were listening, means they were engaged. So we'll just quickly go through them. This is a great one. Can the conclusion be subjective? So do they have to take a clear stance on it, or can they, like, as in, would they basically, is there a preference, sorry, to taking a clear stance, or should they leave it subjective? Do you have an opinion on that when it comes to the conclusion?
A very good question, actually. I would say that it has to be a direct answer. And you do, because you've discussed it, I think you do have to say, well, you know, having looked at all of these arguments, this is what I find most compelling. But I don't think it needs to be clear cut. I mean, with that question number 3, I would say, you know, that sometimes fresh ideas are slow to be adopted, and I would say why, but not always. So you haven't actually sort of said one or the other. You've tried to measure it. You know, you might say, I find it, you know, that it's slower more often than not. You know, sometimes these adjectives can be really useful when you're measuring it. So I think your conclusion, if you're using the word subjective, I think a lot of the essay probably is subjective because it's coming from you as a person, as long as your conclusion reflects the discussion that you've had. For example, if you've had a discussion and then at the end you say, actually, I don't agree with anything I've written, this is what I think the answer is, that's a mistake. All right. So the conclusion must reflect your thinking and your discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you. We have, so Maria Sophia has said, thank you so much, and the talk's been brilliant. So commendations to you, Anne.
Very much.
She's also asked, will it be recorded so that you can view it again? So if you are someone that's asking about going over things like the conclusion, or you want to go over something that has been covered again, You will have access to this recording. It will be sent to you once the webinar is finished. And you will also be sent the resources that Anne was showing and went through. So things like the box plan where she discussed all of the things that could go in the conclusion. Both of those things will all be available to you after. So if you're asking a question about going over something again, or you're hoping to see it, you will be able to do all of that to your heart's content. So hopefully that answers those of you who are asking those types of questions. Someone said, thank you to you both. Great webinar. So well done, Anne, again. I'll do two more here quickly. Someone's asking, should there be a balance between personal IB examples from class and examples from the news? Or is using news examples more appropriate with certain AOKs? What's kind of the balance between where they should be coming from?
I think there should be a smattering of both. The balance will depend on the title and also, how you've gone about it. And I don't think you'll be judged for that. I think they'll be really interested to see those smattering of examples, but nobody's got a checklist in front and they'll say, right, one personal, one researched example. No, just have a combination of it and don't worry about the balance too much. I think students find the personal ones more difficult. So, that's fine. Just, make sure that you've got one or two personal in there. That's enough. That's fine.
Fantastic. Okay. Right. So I think that pretty much wraps all of the questions up. Again, if you are asking about things like references, watching again, looking at the conclusion again, you will be able to have a look at all of those things when you can go back over the recording and see all of the resources. If we could just go to the next slide quickly. So that kind of wraps up, if we go right to the end,
yeah.
That kind of wraps up everyone, the TOK webinar. I'm sure you found that super helpful. I know I would have. So thank you, Anne, so much once again for your help. You've done a fantastic job. For the next couple of weeks, we will have plenty more webinars coming up over the next couple of weeks. Some like this will walk you through how to do specific coursework, and then some where we talk about things like university applications, studying for specific exams. So if that's something that you would all be interested in, you can go to that link that you can see on the screen there, www.lanterna.com/events. And you can see the total catalogue of all of the other talks that we will be doing. Next week, for example, we have international university applications as an IB student. And then later on in the month, a couple of weeks after that, we'll be doing studying for mock exams and go through how to study for each specific subject. So if you would be interested in those things, you can have a look at all the things we have to offer there. And then if you just go to the final one.
Of course.
That's completely the end. So thank you all so much for being here. Again, if you would be interested in those free resources and all of the other things that we have to offer at Lanterna, you can scan this QR code here. Let us know what you thought of the presentation. You'll be sent all of that to your inbox, as well as be entered into a raffle for the chance to win 5 hours of tutoring for free. So if that's something you'd be interested in, please give that a scan and let us know what you thought. But other than that, thank you all so much for joining. We will wrap up here, so you are free to leave. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Having everybody, really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it.
So someone said, thank you very much. It was lovely, very useful, smiley faced. Thank you both so much. Great webinar. So reviews are really good. Yes, thank you very much. And I know I definitely would have found it interesting and very useful if I was a student.
All right. Thank you, Hannah. Thanks for helping me.
Have a great evening.
Take care.
I'll see you later. Bye.
If there's any feedback that I can make things better, all right? If that's part of your remit. Okay.
Yes, of course. I will pass that on. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Take care.
Bye.